Hello, everybody. There's a movie coming out. I'm not sure if it's this week or next week, called A Haunting in Connecticut. And I have stories about a haunting in Virginia. And this was the house that I lived in on Grove Street when my kids were young. So they've experienced all this. And my family members that know, you know, the history when I was in Virginia knows that these things did happen. Uh, you would smell strange smells. I would smell like a man's cologne. I would smell flowers just in odd parts of the house. And in the spot where you'd smell it at, you could feel air, like a circulation of cool air. And the TV, one night, would cut itself off and on, off and on, off and on. And the VCR rewound itself, started rewinding itself one day, and it wasn't even on. It just started rewinding, and I went in there and looked at it, and it still wasn't on. It just rewound and then stopped. And uh, the doors would open and close by themselves. My biggest thing about it was things would get misplaced all the time. You would put something down and go back and look for it, and it would be gone. And then when you would find it, it would be basically back at the same place after you done searched through the whole house. It'd be back at the same place, but it'd have cobwebs on it. That was weird. And but one of the strangest things that happened one time was uh, Joey had been sick. Excuse me, Joe had been sick, and so I had a fold-out couch in the living room. And I folded that couch out, and I let him stand there that night. He was a little boy staying there on the fold-out couch, and I laid in there with him to keep an eye on him. And my daughter slept in my room, which was right off of the living room. She stayed in there. We were the only ones there. My husband I was married to at the time worked for the railroad, and he worked out of town. He would leave on Sunday evening and not come back till either late Thursday night or Friday morning. So we were basically always there by ourselves. And so Joey was asleep. It was like in the middle of the night. Stephanie was asleep. And I heard a radio, and it woke me up. And it was coming from upstairs, and nobody had been upstairs. And so I laid there, and I was listening to it, and I thought, well, am I dreaming? You're kind of like in a daze. Am I dreaming? And so I sat up and I listened, and I could hear like the DJ talking on the radio. And then he played a little bit of music and talked again, and I just sat there. Well, then Stephanie come out of the bedroom. She was like, "Mommy, I hear a radio upstairs." I said, "I know." And then Joey woke up. So I told her, I said, "You sit here, on the bed with your brother. I'm going to go upstairs and check it out." So I went upstairs, and it was a big house. You got to understand, it was a big house. And the upstairs was shut off by a door, so I had to open the door and go up steps, and then all the way down this hallway, once I got to the top steps, to the back bedroom where that radio was playing at. And I did that. And when I turned around, I walked into the back bedroom, turned that light on, and there was a radio over here below the windowsill, and it was just playing. It was blasting. And so when I turned around, my kids were there in the doorway. They didn't want me to go upstairs by myself. I think they were scared, maybe. But anyway, so they followed me up there, and I said, "Well, it's just a radio," but I didn't know how it got turned on, if the alarm wasn't set on it, and nobody had been up there all week. And so I crawled across the bed and stuck my arm down between the bed and the wall to unplug the radio because I couldn't get it to turn off. I tried to turn it off, and it wouldn't turn off. None of the buttons would turn it off. So I climbed, put my arm down between the bed and the wall to unplug it, but my arm wouldn't fit. So I told Joe, I said, "Your arm's smaller than mine." I said, "Come here and climb across the bed." I said, "And reach down there and unplug it because I can't reach it." So he crawls across the bed, and next thing you know, he's like, "Mom?" And I look over, and he's holding the plug, and the radio's still playing. So I said, "Okay." I said, "Must have battery backup." I said, "Well, just take the batteries out of it." And we opened the battery thing, and there was no batteries in it. So he's standing there holding that radio with no batteries and the plug in his hand, and that radio was blaring to beat hell. So he threw the radio on the ground, stomped on it, and threw it out the window. And I told him, I said, well, just, because it was in the middle of the night, I said, just be sure in the morning, go out there and pick up the pieces of that radio before we run over with the lawnmower and pieces fly off and hurt somebody. And the next morning he went out there to look for the radio, and it was gone. Don't know whatever happened to it, but it was gone. And then one time we was sitting there talking about ghost stories that Mom and Dad used to tell us. They lived in a house that weird things happened at, and they used to tell us those stories, all our life. And I was sitting there telling Joey about the stories one night. It was around Christmas time because the tree was in the living room, and me and him and Stephanie were sitting at the dining room table, and I was telling him some of the stories that Mom and Dad used to tell about the house that they lived in, and he was writing them down in a journal. And because I used to keep a journal about things that happened in that house, and so Joey was writing down stuff that happened at the house that Mom and Dad lived in. And I was telling him the stories, and he was writing it down. And then about the time we heard a on the door, so we all turn around and look in the living room. Excuse me. I'm like, who the hell's at the door at this time of night? So Joey said, I'll go see who it is. And we had a big glass door. All you had to do was, look through the blind. You'd be able to see who it was. And so he went to the door and, looked out. And there was nobody there. And so he opened the door and he looked around, and it was a big wide open space. You'd be able to see if somebody had took off. There was nobody there. And so he came right back in there and he sat down and he said, nobody's there. So he picks up his pen and proceeds to write again. He starts to write, and he's like, oh, very funny. And we're like, what? He said, where's the inside of my pen? What do you mean the inside of your ink pen? And at first he accused me and Stephanie of taking, unscrewing the bottom, taking the ink cartridge out because he just had a hollow pen. We never touched that pen. And so we looked everywhere, and he finally found the inside of that ink pen on the windowsill behind the Christmas tree. How it got there, well, who knows? A haunting in Virginia. And then one other time, I was in the bathroom, and the light kept going out. Every time I'd put my foot in the shower, the light would go out. And I'd walk over and I'd flip the light back on. I'd go back and I'd get in the shower, and the light would go out. And I finally went over there after about the third or fourth time, and I flipped the light switch back on, and I said, I would like to take my shower in the light, please. And then the light stayed on. That was rather bizarre. And another time I was in the kitchen, and I kept hearing a little girl, and she would call, Mommy, Mommy, come here, Mommy. And Stephanie was in the shower at that time. And so I kept listening. I turned the radio down and I'd listen out here and say, Mommy, come. I said, where? What? Come here. And so I went across the hall into the bathroom, and I knocked on the door, and I said, Stephanie, what do you want? And I heard her turn the water off. She said, huh? I said, what do you want? She said, what do you mean? I said, are you hollering at me? She said, no. So I hear her turn the water back on, and I go into the kitchen, and I heard it again. I said, where is that coming from? And it was coming from the kitchen drain. And I went over and put my head down in the sink, and I heard it, Mommy. And I looked down the drain. I said, I'm not your mommy, honey. And then it quit. Go figure that one. That was bizarre. But we would have smells, and things would disappear, and nobody would spend the night with me in that house. And my cousin Donna came up one night, and she spent the night with me, but we had to stay up all night long. She refused to go to sleep in that house. I was never afraid of anything in that house. I felt comforted because I felt like I wasn't alone, so I felt comforted. I got tons of these stories to tell, but it's too long to put on one video, so this will just give me something to talk about in the future. And so that's what I'm going to do. So until next time, bye-bye. Bye. Maybe.